Helen Daly, thank you very much for that. Well, more now on this trade agreement struck with Japan, or finalised with Japan. Let's hear from the opposition. The Shadow Minister for Agriculture, Joel Fitzgibbon, is with me now in Canberra. Thank you for your time. From what you've seen of this, is it a good deal for Australia?
Well, we do genuinely, from opposition, try to take a bipartisan approach to these things, David. I mean, this is Australia sort of negotiating with the rest of the world, and the last thing you want is an opposition party running interference. But as the day goes on and we get more and more information about these arrangements, I'm finding it more and more difficult to defend it, to be frank. I've not seen one agricultural representative body today give this agreement their tick of approval.
I guess those groups, though, and you're right, the cane growers, the rice growers, dairy, pork producers and the Cattle Council have all basically said we wanted more. They would all want more, wouldn't they? But it is better than the status quo.
Well, you'd expect them to, of course, say they want more, but I mean, the cane growers, for example, got next to nothing, or indeed nothing. The dairy farmers got very, very little. A few changes to the quotas, but nothing really substantial on tariffs.
Well, for cheese, the cheese gets something. They get a higher quota.
Well, they get a high quota, so at the moment something like 27,000 tonnes goes in without a tariff, but after that you pay the tariff, and that will go to 47,000 over many years. However, I'm not sure that Australia gets to fill all of that space. That might be an increase for other country or trading partners as well, so I need to check on that one. I think that's one of the reasons the dairy industry is pretty unhappy.
And the sugar growers, though, they do get a lower tariff on the international grade sugar.
Wrong grade.
Which is not what Japan buys, admittedly, but could they? If there is cheaper Australian sugar at that international grade available, they could start.
Well, oils ain't oils and sugars ain't sugars, and the cane growers have expressed their view, and they've done it in a most robust way. And of course, George Christensen, one of the government's own backbenchers, who represents a sugar seat, has been pretty forthcoming in his language as well.
Pretty nonplussed. What about beef, though? They do get something. Admittedly, it's over some years, but even in the first year, those very high tariffs do come down 9–11% for frozen and chilled beef.
Well, frozen and chilled, 6 and 8% in the first year, which you could argue is a substantial decrease, but they still get stuck at around 19–20% in the out years, and this is a reduction over 15 to 18 years, so this is a long time coming. So no, I mean, it's an improvement and we welcome that, but no wonder they're unhappy. And of course, unlike other international instruments, the tariffs never get to zero. So at this stage, the best they can ever hope for is in 18 years, just shy of 20%. Now, to put that in relative terms, the car industry, here in Australia, we impose a 5% tariff on cars, which of course will go, but this will still be an almost 20% tariff on our beef. That's fairly substantial. I would say, David, it's 1-1 now. It's 1 for the National Party on GrainCorp, and it's 1 for the Liberal Party on this Japan Free Trade Agreement. The National Party have certainly been the losers out of these arrangements.
Well, Parliament does get an opportunity to vote on ratifying this agreement. From what you know at the moment, which way would you be leaning?
The party hasn't, obviously the Shadow Cabinet Caucus hasn't had an opportunity to discuss that, but I would have thought that in the first instance, and as a matter of principle, the opposition wouldn't be running interference on an arrangement struck by the government of the day.
Even though it's not everything everyone wants, the point being that it's better than nothing, and the government struck this, so you'd be inclined to back it.
You might recall, I suspect around 2003-04 with the US Free Trade Agreement, the opposition of the day, the Labor Party, then sought some amendments to the agreement around the pharmaceuticals companies. So there are options for the Labor Party, but I mean, we haven't even seen the agreement yet, so it's all pretty hard to make comment on.
Well, there's also been concern raised by the union movement about submarines. This could pave the way for Australia buying off-the-shelf submarines from Japan rather than building them locally here in Australia. Are you concerned about that? And as a former Defence Minister, how important do you think it is to build subs locally?
Well, of course I'm concerned for 2 reasons. One, I didn't hear Tony Abbott telling South Australians prior to the election that he didn't have an intention of assembling the submarines in South Australia, as was our plan. 2, I saw Stephen Listley, and I appointed Stephen Listley to the chair of ASPI. He's a friend. I hold him in high regard, and he's entitled to his independence. But this idea that without a review of the strategic assessment, which we spent months doing in government, that you can just decide one day to halve the planned number of submarines is a bit extraordinary. Why not halve the JSF fleet instead?
We definitely need 12.
Well, Not every government gets the strategic assessment and response right. I wouldn't argue that. But I, as Minister, supported by the National Security Committee, spent a lot of months listening to advice from the experts about our strategic situation in the region and what sort of response we might choose. And if you're going to change the number of submarines, I'm not expecting people to make it public, but you want to be able to demonstrate that you've revisited that strategic assessment, not just arbitrarily decided that you only need 6 subs now rather than 12. And I saw Stephen Listley say, 12's too many. Well, we all know about submarines. You need 12 to have 4 operational at any given time. Now,
I think at the moment it's 2 or 3, isn't it, at best?
Well, sadly, I think generally we've got 1 operational at the moment. That was the other suggestion, that you might extend the length of the columns. It won't happen. I'm told, David, that this time, for the first time in eons, we will not be represented at RIMPAC in Hawaii. That's the joint naval exercise, because we just don't have the ships to send. The Navy needs rebuilding. We had a plan in place. They can argue about budget cuts if they like, but we had a plan in place. If they're going to change that plan, they want to be able to demonstrate they've had a close look at our strategic environment.
Final question on the Labor Party. Your New South Wales colleague John Faulkner has today reaffirmed his view that you should open up the selection of senators and state upper house candidates to all party members, not just the faction chiefs.
I'm a great and well-known supporter of party reform. Got me in a bit of trouble with the unions back in about 2002, but I am a strong supporter. But the party also has to be ready for the challenges that will bring to the party. I mean, the leadership ballot showed that those coming to the party are of the progressive left, and the party needs to ensure that it doesn't creep too far from the centre, because it needs to remain electable. I thought Nick Cater in The Australian had a very good piece today about Joe Bullock. He's come in for some criticism in recent days, but the Joe Bullocks of the world, the Conservatives in the party, and I might describe myself as a Conservative in the party, do put some ballast into the party and do help to keep the party electable.
So you'd be worried that letting the party members choose the Senate ticket would end up with just left faction?
No, I'm a believer in letting party members decide. I think you can never have too much democracy. We just need to be ready for where that might take us.
Joel Fitzgibbon, good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.